Starting. Hey guys, good evening. Welcome to the Writer's Journey. This is our 10th episode, and today we're going to wrap up our series on plotting, and we're going to do it by giving the pantsers the last word. So we're going to talk about discovery writing today. We're going to talk about pantsing your way through a novel, and who better to do it than Steve Beaulieu. Woo. Steve is an editor, book designer, keystroke medium host, publisher at Aethon Books, family man, and the co-author of the much-loved Buried Goddess Saga, which he pantsed his way through. In this episode of The Writer's Journey, we're going to break down discovery writing strategies for individual novels, across series, and with an author collaborator. So how are we going to do that? I can't wait to find out. Steve, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you. It's weird to be on this end of the spectrum. It won't be much different. I talk too much anyway, so it'll be just the same.
It'll be great.
This is exciting. Kaylee and I have been looking forward to this for like a month now. So
yes, I am part pantser. I always start out pantsing and then I cross over into plotting. So this is good. It's good stuff.
Scott, where are you in the pantsing plotting?
I like to. I'm kind of a hybrid. I like to go. Actually, I usually try to start out plotting, but then I wind up pantsing. So I wander from the outline. Let's put it that way, just a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. Kayleen and I are learning. We're kind of figuring out what works best for us and figuring out all these strategies. So that's why we need to have guests like Steve on today to tell us, what pantsing strategies have worked for you. So yeah, that's a really great place to start. Can you walk us through what pantsing is, what discovery writing is, and how you use it to write your books?
Well, I believe you've kind of used two phrases already, pantsing, discovery writing. I've heard it called writing into the dark. I believe Dean F. Wilson has coined that phrase. Pantsing to me, I think it might mean something different to everybody that does it. For me, pantsing doesn't mean having no idea what you're going to write and then sitting down and writing a story. I was on another podcast where the host asked me something to that effect, like, how do you just sit down and start writing? You got to have a plan. Well, of course you do. You have, who your characters are. Hopefully, one of the main goals I always have is to know and understand my characters before I start writing. Otherwise, I'm going to get 15, 20,000 words in and realize that this guy is an idiot and I don't really want to be writing about him to begin with. So pantsing for me is more not having a rigid outline that I have to follow throughout the entire book. As a matter of fact, I never have a written outline. So pantsing to me is having something in your head that you want to do. For me, I usually have the beginning and the end, and I kind of say, like, I want to start out in this position, I want my characters to end in this position, and then go, Lord Jesus is what's going to happen in the middle of this book, and I go for it.
Jesus, take the wheel.
Yeah, it's exactly. It's Carrie Underwood all day long. Yep.
That's awesome.
That wraps it up. Show's over.
Yeah, show's over.
We're going to pants our way through the rest of the show.
Time for the after
we are.
That is basically the idea. No, we've got questions. We've got stuff prepared, right? We're prepared.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, we're like some kind of super ninja preparedness people. So
it is. This is pretty good. So
yeah, this is as simple as it is, but also as complicated as it is. As someone who does some plotting, I will be interested in knowing how it is that you get to know your characters so well and the world so well, and the starting conflict, that you're able to let them take the reins and make decisions and react to your conflict and allow that to inform your story.
Well, I think that's why. Hey, Ellen.
Here.
I think that's why I love pantsing so much. I know we're going to get to some of those questions that we saw in the chat earlier, so I don't want to throw anything out there too much. But what you just said is one of the things that I love. My characters speak to me, and I think that's true of most authors. I think some of the stuff that we say as authors, anybody else who said them on the planet would just be considered insane. But as I go to sleep at night, as I'm in the shower in the morning, my characters are speaking to me. My characters are telling me what they want to do next. And when I have a rigid outline, I tend to argue with my characters. But my characters know better than I do what is going to happen in that story. And again, I know how insane this sounds. But I have a thief that is he's the most immoral, awful godless person on the planet, and he's so much the antithesis of who I am that I need him to tell me what the next thing he's going to do is. I need him to. Otherwise, I'm going to make him a Christian, and he's just going to go to church for the rest of the book, and it's going to be ridiculous and stupid, and no one's going to want to read it.
You have to change the name of the book title.
Right?
The Thief Goes to Church.
Whitney Goes to Church by Jamie Castle.
I'd read that.
Nice.
No, but you're totally not insane. I mean, for me, that makes sense because, I mean, I could be trying to go to sleep, and then all of a sudden these scenes are in my head. The characters are saying lines and having conversations with each other. And I'm like, okay, if I just think about it long enough, I won't lose it. And I'm like, no, you idiot. You have to get up. You need to write it down because obviously this is definitely going to fit in somewhere. And sure enough, if I write it down, you know, it changes the whole game. So always
that's really weird for me because I have heard voices my whole life. Usually mine, and I try not to tell people about them. But yeah, I mean, I'm having arguments with myself all the time.
That's books waiting to come out.
Book, Ellen. Oh my goodness, I'd read that book.
You'd have to read it at work, probably.
Now, Kaylee, you had a really interesting question about the onion method.
I did. Oh, yeah. Yes, I did. What is the onion method, and how do you use it? Because that is how specific and interesting on that question I got.
I'm really hoping that this is a coined phrase of mine, onion writing. I've yet to hear anyone else use it, and it came from the movie Shrek, which I hope everybody in this chat has seen. It's one of the greatest movies, right?
Ogres are like
Shrek
onions.
he's an ogre's like an onion, and it's layer after layer after layer. And so for me,
they make you cry.
Yeah, onioning, and a book makes you cry. Onioning is again, it's actually very similar to what I believe Dean F. Wilson calls not Dean F. Wilson, Dean Wesley Smith. There we go. I knew I was saying the wrong name that whole time. Sorry, Dean Wilson. I just gave credit to you for something that's not yours. So onion writing is you start at point one and you write 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 until you can't write anymore. Until you've lost your train of writing, or you've run out of things to write about, or the character stops speaking to you, or you just can't write anymore for that day. And that's your stopping point. But the next time you start writing, you go back to where you started and you continue writing and editing into that until you get to the point where you stopped, and then you keep writing after that. And now you've created layer upon layer upon layer. The next day you go back to, I usually do about 100, 200 words before before my new words started the previous session, and I continue editing and writing as I go. And I just keep going like that, and I build onion after onion after onion. Layer after layer is probably the better way to say that. What I find, sorry, go ahead, Kaylee.
No, I was saying so many onions.
Yeah, there's a lot of onions. What I find in there, and I think I actually messaged Lauren the other day, and I think you said, you got to share that on here. I started at like 1,900 words for a chapter. And for us, 1,900 words is just too small a chapter unless it's absolutely necessary. We try not to do really, really short chapters. I know that most writers say just use as many words as you need to tell the story. And I do agree with that. But my goal in life is not to give the reader a place to stop. And so the more chapter endings we have, the more opportunity the reader has to stop reading, put the book down, stop listening, whatever. Because it's the end of a chapter.
Is that genre specific? Or are we talking about
I don't
fantasy
know
right now? Or
I don't know. I mean, for me, I do that in sci-fi. I do that in fantasy. I know that that's not a hard, fast rule, but like, I do know a lot of readers will stop reading at a chapter and put their book down. And for me, every time that I know my readers putting their book down, I'm not too arrogant to like, listen, I don't have the best book in the world. So like every time they put the book down, that's an opportunity for them to start a different book, or to never pick that book up again, or their kid to knock it behind the nightstand and they lost it, and whatever. And so so my point was 1,900 words for me is just too short a chapter. Unless it's absolutely necessary. And so I went back and I onioned it, and it turned into a 3,500 word chapter with just one extra layer of writing. It's amazing to me how many things you see that you missed, how many little nuances, how many you read through and you go, well, okay, so he said this and she said that, but there was a whole conversation they should have had in between what he said and then she said. But you don't always catch that the first time because you're just writing and you just want to get the story out. And it's like doing a second draft, but doing it all at once, so there's not as much revision.
Yeah, it's interesting you say the like the 1,300 words. I've never been much of a word counter. I'm trying really hard this year to somewhat keep track of my words. But I know that when I'm writing my chapters, when I get to the point that I'm sectioning them out for chapters, I always shoot for 4 to 6 pages of like 8.5 by 11. I don't know what that amounts to words, but that's
250 words per page.
Right. What goal?
Anyway.
Steve, what you're talking about? There's a guy named Stephen James who writes some books on writing, and he talks a lot about that. And God, dang, I have it on my shelf. Basically, it's a Story Trumps Everything is the name of the book by Stephen James. And he does the same thing, except he starts almost all the way from the beginning every time. And I've done that by default when I start to lose track of the story. And it's good unless you go back so many times that you start to kind of kill your enthusiasm for the early part of the work. But I think the layering thing you're talking about is extremely valuable. And everybody does it to a certain extent in each revision.
Well, the beautiful thing is that if you get to 75,000 words and realize that a character has just come into play that should have actually been there at your 20,000 word mark. Yeah. What I generally do is I just go back to that 20,000 word mark and I start writing again from there. And so it becomes reading more than writing, but you're editing in and you're making sure that that character gets his time or her time on screen throughout those 60,000 words, 50,000 words, whatever it is. And it may seem like that takes a whole lot longer, but in my experience, you get a much deeper story when you're focused on every element that you might have missed without waiting until the end of the draft and then going through sketchy notes that you've written down and you don't even really remember what it is that you wrote down. Sure, you could use comments on Word or Pages or whatever, but for me, I just would rather do it in the moment while it's fresh and I have passion to do that particular thing.
So for what you're saying, I actually ran into this problem. So what would you do for a series? So by the time I got to book 3 was when I realized this character should have been here in book 1. So what do you ever run into that kind of very large problem?
I can answer really only for myself. Obviously, can't answer for everybody.
That's why you're here, man.
Yeah. So I have to be careful how I say this, although I say it on KSM a lot. I'm not an advocate for write as much as you can just so you can go full time. Although I believe that going full time is important, I don't believe it's important enough to jeopardize the stories that you want to tell. And so I'm a firm believer that however long it takes, write your 3 books before you release them, whether that's 8 months, 10 months, 4 months, it doesn't matter. Write those first 3 books or the 3 books or whatever. Don't release them until they're done because you're going to get to book 3. And you're probably going to want to go back into book 1 and make some adjustments. I mean, we did it constantly through the Buried Goddess Saga, and it became such a better series because in book 3, we're like, oh, this character's here. And in order for this character to be the best that they could be, the entire culture of the place that they came from needs to shift to make that work. And so we'll go through the entire series and we'll make the adjustments to the culture so that character could be as good as possible. But when you write a book, release a book, and then give yourself 3 weeks to write the next book because you're just trying to get them out there, you lose so much opportunity to make a phenomenal story at the expense of maybe going full time, getting a big boost, and then it falls off, whatever. But if you create valuable stories that last a lifetime because you've taken your time to care for them, that's how I look at it. I want my 3 books out before I start releasing anything. That way I'm solid on the story, the characters, the cultures, all of those things.
Yeah, my first series, that was exactly my biggest takeaway. I'm not releasing anything until I have those set, because yeah, that was a nightmare. Not gonna lie.
If you do it right, you can take those 3 books and launch a full-time career. I mean, it's very difficult. Like, honestly, I mean, the stories that we hear people talk about, those are not normal. Especially you hear about people that went full-time releasing one book, and then you look at it and their book was released in 2015, 2016, which is like, I don't know, apparently the golden year where you could just throw anything on the internet and people buy books. It doesn't work that way anymore in any kind of measurable, quantifiable. I don't know what the word I'm looking for, but like, we can't count on being able to go full-time just because we wrote a bunch of books.
So it sounds like onion layering is kind of the key. That's how you get your way through the novel, but that's also how you get your way through the whole series.
The whole series.
Have you ever read the Mote in God's Eye?
No, but I'm familiar with it.
Okay, you just know that book was written that way because there are so many layers and so much detail, and so much that it's so rich and an incredible story. I mean, even Robert Heinlein said that was the best first contact story ever written.
Yeah.
So
I think what you're talking about, I think another advantage of that too is it's going to reduce some of the there's 2 things. It'll reduce the stress of trying to keep that schedule. So if you have 3 books written and then you want to do a rapid release, that's a lot less stressful than, now it takes patience, and I'm not patient enough to do it myself, but I could see the benefit in not having to chase the second book.
Yeah. Well, and if your series goes past,
product out there,
you are putting a better quality, and you have the opportunity to let all your ARC readers read your first 2 books before your 3rd book is even finished. And so you'll catch all these silly little things that the ARC readers go, "This is dumb, man. Why is this in here?" And you might listen to them, you might not. The ARC readers are never, they're not always right, but it gives you so much more time to prepare for putting out the best series you can.
But that also assumes that you have ARC readers and you don't spend a year and a half writing these 3 books and then you can't sell any of them.
Absolutely right.
That's a danger. But it's a risk. Maybe it's worth taking, maybe it's not. It's personal preference, I guess.
Well, so you guys know I run Aethon Books, and with Aethon we have several authors. Some are very quick writers, some are not. I have one writer who he maxes out at about 400 words a day. That's tough. I mean, he spends 10 hours on 400 words sometimes. And I've been working with him on just not getting so caught up in every minute detail of the story, because I think that's what slows him down, is that every line has to be perfect, when the reality is, no, you just get your story out and then you can either onion back into it or do a second draft or whatever it is. But I would get incredibly discouraged if every day of my life was a 400-word day.
For 10 hours.
For 10 hours, yeah. Don't misunderstand, man. If you're spending an hour or 2 on 400 words, that's probably okay, I guess. But like, if your entire day is focusing on this and you're getting 400 words out, it might be time to step back and wonder why. Maybe your outline's not good enough. Maybe you shouldn't be a pantser, right? Or maybe you need to be a pantser. Who knows? But I don't know why I started talking about that.
Maybe that's not the story that you need to write. Maybe
perhaps, yeah,
something else in there.
Oh, I was saying that because for a lot of people, getting 3 books ready, if you're a 400 word a day writer, man, 3 books will take you, I don't know, 3 years. It could be an insanely long process. And let's not forget, I think Tolkien took 70 years to write Lord of the Rings or something ridiculous like that, because he created an entire language to go along with it, and he just took a very slow path of writing that series. But in today's day and age, man, if it's taking you a year to write a book, you might need to consider a different release schedule and realize that you're probably just not going to make as much money as everybody else, because that's just not what sells right now.
Well, on that note,
sad but true. Sad but true.
We are going to have a show sponsor.
Yes, we are. Reading my mind, Lauren.
Yeah. Before we get to that, we're going to dig deeper into the strategies on how to pants your way through the finished book. And also, Devin Ford wants to know which Spice Girl you feel most like. But before that, Kayleen, what's this word from our sponsor?
So, this episode of The Writer's Journey is brought to you by Captain Phenom, The Amazing World of Captain Phenom, Book 1, by K.R. McClellan. Not your average superhero. Charlie Platt is a 15-year-old boy with cerebral palsy, a loner who likes to draw superheroes. Just about everyone at his school picks on him and calls him Charlie Splat. His only true friend is his next-door neighbor, Maggie McGee, a tomboy a year younger than Charlie. One day, while at a routine doctor's appointment, he is accidentally given a serum intended for adult test subjects to help cure cerebral palsy. But unbeknownst to anyone, this particular serum had been radiated by being set down too near uranium meant for an atom bomb brought into the city by terrorists. With the mutated serum in his blood, Charlie starts to feel stronger. He finds out that when he gets put under stress, he mutates into Captain Phenom, a super strong, super fast hero for the people. He sets out to get even with the bullies who have made his life hell. But when he learns of the terrorist threat to the city, he has a new objective.
Ah!
I mean, I want to buy it. Kayleen, you sold it to me.
Yay!
That sounds fun. That sounds like an adventure. It could be.
So, after that, which Spice Girl do you feel most like?
Beardy Spice.
I mean, yeah, apparently that's my name in the company, so I'd have to go with Beardy Spice. But what are their names? We got Posh Spice, Baby Spice, Ginger Spice.
I said I felt you and you feel like Baby Spice, or at least you imagine what I imagine Baby Spice would feel like.
I wouldn't mind knowing what Baby Spice feels like.
I mean, we need a scientific study of how this works.
Who are the other ones? Scary Spice. Let's go with Scary Spice. I identify with Scary Spice. Done.
There you go.
Yay.
Old Spice.
Now we know.
I identify with Old Spice.
Old Spice. There you go.
Don't ask me for that.
Well, Luke T. Barnett had another question for us. It's a little less spicy, and his question is, what do you do when you get stuck and you don't know where the story should go next? As a pantser, what do you do when you get stuck?
You write the next sentence. Stupidest answer I could ever give you.
I got an idea for that. I spent most of my incredibly long journey on this as a pantser, and what usually happens to me is I would wind up writing a new character, which probably means a new setting, because a new character is going to be fresh, and you should probably do that with the understanding that you may have to throw it away because you might be opening a new rabbit trail that doesn't fit the story, but it can be liberating. The other thing I do when I get stuck, whether I'm pantsing or outlining, is I will, like if I normally type, I'll voice dictate, or if I normally voice dictate, then I'll type. Mm-hmm. And just the change of the actual mechanical method sometimes will break something free. And then the other thing you do when you get stuck is go take a nap or go for a walk or something. It's usually a good way to break free.
I could agree with that, man. If you just don't know where you're going, I'll listen to a book, and I'll just step away from it totally, and I'll go to a story that I'm listening to, and potentially something will happen. But I mean, my simple answer is to write the next line, and all that means is it might not be a good line, it might not be the best line, but when you finish that line, you write another line, and you write another line, and you keep writing lines until something breaks.
So sometimes you have to push.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we want it to all be glorious and loving, and we're having this a great artistic, emotional experience. But sometimes you just got to push until you, and then you come back, and then maybe you throw those words away. But
be willing to throw your words away for sure.
Yeah, you push a little bit. Yeah, go get somebody qualified to do it for you. That's always the best option.
So Ranzer the Red said the answer is to plan ahead a little. I'll be honest, man. I have seen so many outliners who get writer's block, and I would maybe argue that I've met more outliners that get writer's block than pantsers, because pantsers are used to just solving problems while they go, and you just have to be willing to kill your darlings. If they suck, you kill them, and you move on, or you send that 5,000 words to somebody who's willing to kill them for you. And that way you don't waste the next 20,000 words, and just make sure that you've got you got to know your end goal. As long as your character gets from the beginning of the story to the end of the story, you can work out everything in the middle with a good editing team.
So I do want to add something that you were saying with, like, Scott, go out, take a walk, take a nap. When I get stuck, I'll do that. I'll start doing the dishes or the laundry, but I'm always rerunning the scenes that I have written through my head. I might remember a bit of dialogue, kind of play it over like an action scene, and I just keep replaying it. And then at some point it starts to evolve into something more. And then that's the point when I stop and I start writing again. That's how I break through my writer's block. But we did have
Josh. Oh, sorry. Maybe you were going to do the same thing I was going to do just now. No?
Okay. 1, 2.
I was going to
there's
Josh Hayes.
Chat question.
No, Josh Hayes actually he's in the chat and he gave a great, he skips it and he goes to the next thing that he knows happens and connects his pieces later. And I think that's probably.
Yeah. Which is also a good segue into what I was going to say.
Yeah, cool.
Shadow Illustrator had a question. Does it help you to write a story in random order and fix the order in editing? I always do. What about you?
Me, no, because I'm a pantser. And so, like, no, I don't have a chapter by chapter outline. So I can't go to chapter 11 if I'm writing chapter 4, because I have no idea in hell what's going to happen in chapter 11. I just know that I need to get my character from point A to point B. Literally in a lot of fantasy books, that means from this city to that city. And you have various, you follow, what's his name? Larry story
Brooks.
Structure. Larry Brooks. He has a book. What is it?
Story Engineering by Larry Brooks.
Story Engineering by Larry Brooks. Phenomenal. And I think I just look like Donald Trump. Phenomenal.
The other one, not so much. This one,
well, yeah, the best ever. It's the best book ever. It's the best thing you should ever buy. Except my books, you should get my books. They're amazing. I read a lot of those story writing books that help me when I pants.
Yeah,
I'm not against understanding a proper story or the outlining of a proper story. I just don't use it because I feel it stifles me as a writer. I'm the same way with music. I don't want to read music.
Right.
I want to write music.
Another good book that would help with your pantser, I would highly recommend. It's called Blueprint, the bestseller. Blueprinting. Oh gosh, I can't remember it. If you look up Blueprint, the bestseller, basically they recommend you write your book, and then you have to make a list without reading the book or looking at your outline. You have to remember. You get out a notebook and you write down all the scenes. And if all the scenes are important, you will remember. This is their thesis, not mine. If you remember the scene, it's important. If you don't remember it and you go back and look at it, then you have to figure out, why did I not remember that scene? Because it must have been boring or not important. But that book is a big proponent of, you write the story and then you put the story parts in narrative order. So after you write it, you might move them around so they make the story more powerful, regardless of whether you outlined or pants. So Blueprint the bestseller. I'll look it up while other people talk.
All right. So our next question we have is, if you're not outlining your plot before you write, does that mean you have to keep track of your story details? It's like your character details, your location, your timeline, your events. Do you have to keep track of that afterwards just to make sure there aren't any plot holes? If so, how do you keep track of all those details? Like, what's your method for keeping track of them?
I do something called post outlining.
Mm-hmm.
First, I'll say this: if you're onioning like I do, because pantsing and onioning are very different things. Pantsing means you're going from point A to point B and you're not stopping. A lot of guys believe that you just never stop writing your book; you just keep going until you get to the end of your book. When you're onioning, I find that you catch those things way sooner and way easier than maybe even if you're outlining, because an outline can be deceiving. I mean, I do know a lot of guys that write 10,000. I know a guy that wrote a 33,000 word outline once. So I get it. Like, there's some planning in there, but your outline can be deceiving, man. You could have this great outline and you can forget a major point that needs to connect several things. And if you're just following your outline, you might not write it. But if you're onioning the way I do, you're going to read back over and go, well, wait, how does Joe know what Janet said that you're supposed to do in the first, like, there's those things you catch.
Gotcha.
So post outlining, yes, I write down major things that happened in every single chapter so that when the time comes for me to touch that point again, I don't have to go back and read. I can just look at my post outline. And those are bullet points. There's nothing else. Maybe what my characters are wearing, a name of a new character, where they ended up in the last chapter that they were in, you know, just simple things like that.
This is so cool. Like, you have names for things that I do that I thought I was crazy for doing them because it's just a waste of time, and you're telling me they're not. So I'm gonna keep doing it.
I think a lot of people do this stuff, and I kind of think a lot of the big names are pantsers, and they just don't want to admit it because it's so taboo.
Well, and the thing is a lot of the big names have been writing for so long, it's internalized.
Yeah.
You know, like Stephen King can pants because he knows story structure from writing thousands and thousands of words every day for 50, 60, 70 years, however long it's been. So he may be a pantser, but he understands the structure. I think the structure is more important than the outline.
Yeah, for sure.
He has practice writing, but he also has practice editing. So he's probably cut, you know, tens of thousands of words. I don't know, maybe even hundreds of thousands of words in the editing stage when he had to redo them. And you kind of hope that by, or on the plotting side, right? You hope that by pantsing your way through your outline first before you start writing, that you'll cut fewer words later. I don't know if it's true. I mean, it might be true for some people. It might not be true for everyone, though.
Something that I can't stress enough is that good writers read. I don't know if that's a fact or anything like that, but that is something that I believe strongly. And you know, there's no braggadocio here, but I listen to about 150 books a year. The reason I do that is my wife always asks me, "Are you working? Are you listening to something for work?" And although I'm not, my answer is kind of yes, and she understands what that means now. Because for me, every book you listen to is a learning experience. If you are bored out of your mind and you look at that book and you're at 25% and there hasn't been a point of no return yet for your characters, that book's not written well. You gotta have these moments that like, you know how like when you're watching TV, you watch for 15 minutes and a commercial comes on. Well, that thank God we don't have to do that anymore. But that trained our brains to have about 15-minute attention spans because we just do things for 15 minutes, do something else, 15 minutes, do something else. When you're listening to or reading a book, I believe your brain kind of has muscle memory and it starts to recognize these moments that happen in good books that push you to that next moment. And so you've got a 25% mark, a 50% mark, a 75% mark, where something has to happen within about a 3% give or take one way or another.
Yeah, it has to be something that matters too. It can't just be action. It's got to be a critical choice the characters make.
So
Luke can't just be blowing more stuff up.
Yeah, exactly. So Luke, you're saying, or Bard of today, I'm sorry, I don't know if I'm supposed to say who you are, but
you outed him.
My bad, Luke. You say I disagree. That's basically an outline. No, I'm not outlining anything. But the more you listen to books, you automatically do those things. I'm not. Again, every book I've ever written, I can look at the 25% mark and I hit that point of no return within 3% one way or another without trying at all. Because I've listened to enough books and I've read enough books and I've edited enough books to know when you're supposed to make a change. It's just, especially if you're writing 100,000 word books, you just know at 25,000 words, I got to do something.
So that's really, that's a learned thing. You got to keep writing the words, write the best words you can, do the best books you can, but get to that next book, learn a new storyline, new characters, because that's really going to teach you more. Okay, well, here was the 25, give or take, in that book. But in this one, with a whole new set of circumstances, it's going to change where that might fall. So that's going to change how you get there, which if you keep writing, you'll be able to internalize that and get there quicker without necessarily needing an outline right out of the gate.
Exactly.
Is what I'm saying.
More writing, more reading. Yep.
Sorry, go ahead, Seth.
I was just agreeing with Kayleen. I also wanted to we have a bunch of questions in our show notes that I think we should get to that are also very good.
Sure.
So you want to do this now, or did somebody have to finish up some thoughts? I don't want to cut anybody off.
Well, I was just going to say that the last thought for me was that some books are 250,000 words, so 25% looks different than a 100,000 word book. And some of that is learned. You got to go, okay, this person's been reading now for 6 hours and nothing valuable has happened. If you're bored writing it, people are going to be bored reading it. And so I don't know. Go for it. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I think like we're talking about is you know when you're bored, and if you're bored, you're definitely going to bore your readers. So I'll go ahead and get us started off on some of these. Dean Floyd asked a few questions. Where do you start a pantsuit story? Character, setting, antagonist, climactic ending? What informs what? Is the question.
Everything I write is character focused. For using the Buried Goddess Saga as an example, really the only negative reviews we've gotten on Web of Eyes have been that they were a slow start, that it was a slow start. But then everybody who's read past that slow start says it was a slow start, but when it picked up, it never stopped. I believe very, very strongly in creating character early on and then stopping, focusing on your, quote, character growth to allow the plot to carry you, and then build the character in normal circumstances that we as human beings grow as we go. So like that book takes place over about a month. There's not going to be ridiculous, tremendous character growth in the month of a person's life. There might just be one or two little things that shift and change in their hearts or in their thought processes because of certain things that happen. But in the long haul, we've got, I don't know, several years worth of story in the series where we can grow our characters and do specific things. So, Dean, for me, everything is character. Everything is character. I think great characters can get you through stupid, mundane stories better than stupid, mundane characters can get you through great stories.
So with that, Dean Floyd had asked, as a pantser, how do your characters change as you write the draft? Or do your characters come into you already fully fleshed out?
Especially as a pantser, your characters grow as you write, which is why I stress having 3 books if you're going to write a series. Now, if we're going to do a standalone novel, which is like apparently taboo in the indie world, but if you're going to do a standalone novel, you better have that thing planned and plotted, and that's got to be an amazing 150, 120,000 words if it's going to be a standalone novel. So I'm not talking about those. Okay. But if we're doing a series, that's why I stress having those 3 books done, because your character is going to grow with you. And you're going to recognize elements of those characters that should be a little bit different. At book 2, you look back and you go, you know what? It would be such a better story if this happened in chapter 14 of book 1. And so characters grow for me. They're not fully fleshed out. I could read you the what some of you might call an outline that I had for Web of Eyes. It was about 150 words of just like the very first thoughts that came into my head. Hardly any of them stuck around. And the point is that those 150 words informed everything, and most of it was about my character. Almost all of it was about my character.
So say you're a pantser starting a new book and you don't know your characters yet because you haven't written said book yet. What are some strategies they could use to get to know their characters before they start writing scene 1?
So to answer this, I want to go back to a previous question that was asked, and it was, what do you do when you don't know what to write next? Another way to think about that is to put yourself in the character's shoes, because your characters should be very real people. And so if your characters are real people and you're in a circumstance, I'm going to take this off because there's a weird shadow that I keep getting bothered by. Now there's just this giant shine right here.
I dig it. It's a
yeah. Solidarity, man.
Yeah.
If your characters are real people, then you should be able to ask the question, what would I do next if I were them? And at least that should get you going again. So I have no idea why I was there. What was your question?
How to develop a character? Was that it?
Strategies for getting to know your character before you start writing. Like give them a monologue and let them talk, and just kind of like write out. Like heard of people interviewing their characters before, like asking them questions and then letting the character kind of answer back. So some strategies to get to know your characters.
I think one
make it a real person, right?
Yeah, make it a real person. I had read, and I can't remember who said it, as a famous writer said, your character needs to want something from the very first scene. And they said, even if it's a glass of water. So maybe as a character sketch thing, you could say, okay, my character is hungry but can't eat. What would they do? You know, put them in a thing where they want something they can't have and see how they deal with it. Do they throw a tantrum? Are they nice? Do they ask for help? Do they try to go it alone? Those are maybe some starting cues.
That's good.
So I'm going to pull out my beautiful hardcover edition of Web of Eyes.
That's so nice.
That's the thief on the cover that you mentioned?
This is Whitney. This is our thief. I'm going to show you the very, very first thing that I wrote for this story. And it ended up, yeah, story time, children. It ended up about, I don't know, 16 pages or so in, but it was still the first thing that I wrote. I'll set it up. Long story short, Whitney is being harassed by a drunken dwarf, and Whitney's a little bit drunk as well. But here's literally the first thing I ever wrote. My name is Whitney Firestone. Yes, yes, he said in practiced rhythm, performing an exaggerated bow. The same Whitney Firestone of Westvale fame, he who stole the sword of grace from right under Lord Theroy's nose. Try that again. He who stole the sword of grace right from under Lord Theroy's nose, while the right bugger slept face down in a pile of his own spit. Had a throw with his lady daughter that evening as well. Whitney's laugh was joined by a few others. He hopped down from the table, his voice growing louder after he steadied himself from nearly slipping on a puddle of the dwarf's spilled ale. The mischievous master of mayhem, he continued, the very same credited for single-handedly delivering the splintering staff out of the hands of the whispering wizards. You know them, dwarf? Whitney Firestone, savior of the sullen and surly. That's you. Hope for the hopeless and helpless, thief of all thieves, and the filcher fantastic himself. So, from the start, Whitney was just this braggart, arrogant, everything, just so you know, everything he said he did, he made up. It's not true. What's beautiful about that for me, I'm saying my own stuff's beautiful, but I'm going to say it anyway. What's beautiful about that particular portion is I'm in book 4 writing right now. And Whitney has had a traumatic event that happened in book 3 that just wrecked his entire life. And he's kind of given up on this whole thief thing, given up on everything that he is. He's actually become a much better person because of it. But there's this moment where Whitney the thief really needs to come back. And he's locked up in a cage, and he delivers the exact same speech that he delivered in chapter 1 of book 1 in I don't know, 500,000 words later. And that's his turnaround moment where he's like, I am Whitney Firestone again. And he delivers that speech. And so that first thing I ever wrote about Whitney has carried me through 550,000 words to the place that we're at right now in that series. And
by that point, the reader probably knows all that stuff's made up.
Oh yeah. And he is so arrogant. He mentions those things constantly just so people don't forget he's done them, but he didn't do them.
Wow.
It's kind of an interesting characterization that you've built. Right away, you're creating a picture of who this character is, just by the way that they're talking. You know, so
right.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, that's good. I also like the way it develops as you learn that he's making it up. It gives you deeper insight. So you get your first impression of this guy's being a braggart, but as you go forward, you're like, he made that up. That didn't happen.
What's fun is that we've tried our hardest to make every reader wonder if any of it actually happened. Like Whitney's in jail and he's offering a ring that's super precious. And so like we had this nice Lord of the Rings throw there. But he's offering this ring, like, let me out and I'll show you where this ring is buried just north of here. And so that brings you back to all these things he's bragged about and goes, but like, what would happen if they actually let him out? Would he have a ring? So we're, in my mind, he's never done any of these things, although he's probably capable of with enough luck. So I don't know. I don't know.
Bringing that back to what you're talking about with the onion method, so you have this initial monologue that he's doing, I'm assuming like in a bar, and that you're writing the story, and that's when you get an idea of like, oh my goodness, he's such a braggart, as you said. He needs to keep repeating this kind of thing because he doesn't want people to forget it. So it's like, it's those sorts of things in a pantzer's frame of thinking through the onion method, where you then go back, however far, this would be a good part to be like, mention those other three things again, just to kind of stick it in there of who he is. So that's pretty cool.
I like to become Whitney Firestone. And so I'm sarcastic and arrogant and ridiculous, and I like to make jokes about
you already got
things.
the beard.
So
you already
it
got
works.
the beard.
Yeah.
You're halfway there.
Yeah.
So can we talk about endings, or do we have some more questions we want to get from our? So I think talking about endings is very important for anybody who's going to pants to a novel.
We go ask that question. We do have more, but go ahead.
We should save the ending for the end. We'll leave that as a cliffhanger. Let's get.
There
to
was
the
a
next
question I promised. There was a question I promised I'd answer. Do you have that one?
Was it from Pink Floyd?
Was it about
co-writing? About co-writing.
Oh, we've got lots of questions about co-writing. Here's one. So your Buried Goddess Saga has a lot of fans and great reviews on Amazon, and those books are co-written with a friend, Brett Bruno, and you've got a whole series art. So that brings up two questions. What does pantsing look like with an author collaboration, and what does your writing process look like in the series?
So I answered a similar question on Facebook by saying, like, those of you who have not read the book that Rhett and I wrote, I feel like would be probably a little bit surprised at how we do it, because not all collaborations look like what we do. We talked to, I don't know, dozens of collaborators and only found a select few that were truly doing what we do. Not even saying ours is better or anything like that, but it's just different. We both write about 50-50 of these books, and really we touch 100% of every single word in every single book. So if the series is right now, when this book's done, I don't know, 500 and something thousand words, I've personally written half of that, at least half of that. And then I've edited and written into the other half of that, which means there's not a single word that I don't have the ability to change or throw away, whether I wrote it or Rhett wrote it. The only stipulation that he and I have together is that if you're going to cut something that's important, we talk about it. Most of the time, the cutter gets the privilege. If I read something he wrote and it's not something that I like and it's not good, I get the upper hand. And I get to say, it's not good, it shouldn't be in there, and vice versa. It's a true partnership where, like, there's just no ego in it. We have to just throw away whatever the other person doesn't like. As a pantser, that puts us in some weird positions because he writes his point of view characters, I write my point of view characters, and the only agreement we have is that when we get to a certain point, they're together. That's it. I could literally do whatever I want with my characters, and he could do whatever he wants with his characters. He generally outlines all of his characters. I generally don't. And the only reason I say generally is because when you get this deep into a series, there's a
static.
Can hear you?
Better.
So when you get this deep into a series, there's a moderate amount of planning that has to take place. I don't consider it outlining. I just consider the point of, like, here's where you start, here's the middle, here's the end, get me there. So how does pantsing look in co-writing? You have to either, well, let me back up. All co-writing, you absolutely have to be, like, on point with your co-author. In our book, I say, like, it's totally like a marriage. And I actually had one reader get pissed off at me for calling it like a marriage. They're like, I was with you until you started talking about you and your boy being married. And I'm like, come on, man. But it is, man. It is like because we have children together. As silly as that sounds,
And
our
they
books
live
are
forever.
our kids, and they live
So you-
forever.
So you divide it by point of view chapter. So
Yeah. So there are times he'll write my chapters, I'll write his chapter. But like for instance, Torsten Unger, this guy belongs to Rhett. He is the pious knight who loves his god unconditionally, and I was not able to write that because it was way too close to who I am and having way too many weird little things that I don't agree with. So it was very hard for me to write that character. I get Whitney.
Mhm.
I get Sora.
Mhm.
The other ones we don't have pictures of, but I have another female character in book 4, and he has another male character in books 3 and 4. The only stipulation there is that he and I have really kind of passed Sora back and forth. And so Sora becomes the point of view character that gets a little bit more, a little less pantsing from me. So Whitney's totally pantsed. Marave is totally pantsed. Sora's sort of planned, and then Rhett does his other characters. And then we switch. Completely switch.
Is Red a pants drawer planner?
Rhett is a middle. He's in the middle somewhere. He's not a great outliner, but he realizes that since I'm not, he has to be a little bit better than I am. And so he does a little bit of outlining, not much.
So, like with Web of Eyes, do you have one character point of view throughout the whole book, or do you have like chapter 1 is Whitney, chapter 2 is Sora, chapter 1 to Whitney?
The way that we decided to do the series is that every new book gets at least one new point of view character. So book 1 is Whitney and Torsten, and that is it. So it's back and forth. The thief, the knight, the thief, the knight, the thief, the knight. And I don't think they double up at all. They're 6,000-7,000 word chapters that go back and forth. Book 2, we added Sora, who actually appears in book 1. Book 3, we added a guy named Rand. Book 4, we've added a girl named Marave. And book 5, we're going to have at least one more. We might actually end up with two new ones. So it's not crazy amounts of point of view like Wheel of Time with 1,020 something points of view across the series, but it's interesting.
Yeah, that's cool. One of my favorite things about well-written book is that the character's voice comes across very strongly. So if you as an author have a strong voice, and then Rhett, your co-author, has a strong voice, then you can really maximize that to your advantage by giving you separate characters like that.
Well, one interesting thing is that my wife can't even tell who wrote what in these books. She knows my writing. She can't tell. Rhett's wife can't tell. We at one point weren't going to tell anybody who wrote them because he and I have this like really, really close writing style. But in the end of everything, I'm the editor basically. So I go through from beginning to end, and I kind of make sure the voice is consistent through the entire series. They become my words in the end. And Rhett, Rhett's not offended by that. But
I was going to ask that because, as collaborators, you definitely have two different author voices. So you have to find a way to kind of meld those together. But then even as a pantser, you're in a lot of discovery writing. How, especially with the character voices, do you not lose who those characters are, especially since you guys are switching back? So you answered my question. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know. He and I just get into our characters' heads really well, I guess. And again, I know that some of this sounds like I'm boasting or anything or something, but like we just believe in getting into our characters' heads. And so Torsten never, ever, ever sounds like Whitney, and Whitney never sounds like Torsten. I would challenge somebody to please read the book and find a place where like Whitney makes decisions Torsten would make. They're just not there because like we refuse to let it happen. So if you're writing point of view characters, they got to be different. They got to be very different. And you got to be willing to read it and know that like, that's not what Torsten would do in this situation. You're just trying to get the characters to move forward, but that's not what he would do. So I make sure the voice is the same, but the motivations are vastly different throughout the entire series for each character.
If nobody has any objections, can you take that and roll into how to do endings powerful endings as a pantser, because that's normally what really kills a pantser is you get to the end and you're like, okay, now we're done, and it's lame.
I think one of the beautiful things about pantsing this series has been that we are absolutely shocked and surprised by our endings, and that has carried over to like the readers. We don't have a clue necessarily where every book is going to end. We know what needs to happen in the end, but we have let our characters tell us how the stories are going to end. And what's so cool about co-writing is that I'll read Rhett's book, and it's like I'm reading his portion, and it's like I'm reading a different book. Like, I don't know exactly what he's going to do, but then I get to change it. I get to develop it, and he gets to do the same to me. So in the end, he might do something in the end that I go, crap, I wasn't planning on doing that, but it's so good, we're going to do it. And so the endings, as long as we land, this villain gets defeated, we don't decide if they're going to die. As a matter of fact, I just told Rhett this for the first time as his co-author. I roll a d20 when my characters are in danger, and
any modifications? Do you get modifications?
Yes, they have handicaps.
You get like +2 for having a beard and -1 for...
Whitney can only die on a 20. Which I know it should be a 1, but that's just how my head works.
But he can die. Your main character
can die. Whitney absolutely can die.
And you roll it every time?
Every time there's an opportunity for a real person to die, I roll a d20. So in book 4, if you read on Facebook that I was having an incredibly emotional moment with book 4, it's because I didn't want that character to die.
Did you roll a 20?
No, but it didn't need to be a 20 for her because she wasn't as important as my main characters. So she could only die in an 18, 19, 20, and I rolled an 18. Ooh. And the only way that I can keep that particular thing true is if I do exactly what I say I'm going to do. And so I'm sitting there in the coffee shop, like killing off a character that I had some plans for and that I had some dreams for. It's a character. Well, I won't tell you that because you'll be able to figure it out if you haven't read it. But I believe it's a real world, and if somebody could die in real life, they can die in my books.
So really emotionally invested in it.
Yeah.
And this is like really interesting. So you're kind of taking pantsing to a whole new level with the D20, because not only are you just sort of, you're onioning out into the Nessosphere, but you're like, hey, let's just throw a dice and see what happens. That's totally going to change how a scene is, going to end up being. If you have a scene in your head, you're like, okay, but something needs to happen to the character. How bad is it going to be? I need to do that. I want to start doing that. This just sounds like so much fun.
Yeah. Just like 14 through 17, just something bad would have happened. And so she wouldn't have died, but she did.
No, and I can tell you're not over it. And I mean that.
Sucks,
I'm not being an ass. I mean, I can tell that.
No, it sucks. It really, really sucks. And so, but you know what? Here's the thing. Like, I know what the end of the story needs to be, and I could still get to the end of the story. It just changes things a little bit. It's just like real life, man. We have major goals that we have to get to in life, but crap happens, and we have to learn to navigate through those things. And when you don't know your characters are going to die, your readers don't know your characters are going to die. And I could be writing 3 books with this, like, we're setting up for this person to be the king of the entire kingdom. And I roll a d20 and he dies. And the character's like, what? Or the readers are like, what just happened? Now my goal is to make the readers not hate me for killing off a character. I think we achieved it. I think book 4 achieved it. We'll see.
It's a tall order. I know a lot of people stop. My dad in particular refuses to watch the Game of Thrones after Jon Snow died. Keep trying to tell him he came back.
So wait, he didn't even get the chance to see that he came back?
He wouldn't try to start over. And
one of the things is, like, we don't magic people back. Although if you read book 1, there's a little bit of that happened, but that was because it was a plot, not necessarily a D20 roll that was supposed to happen. But I will tell you this, for readers, guys, if you're reading the series right now, your main beloved characters are not dead. I want to tell you that right now. If the day comes where Whitney, Torsten, or Sora die, you're not going to know unless somebody spoils it and tells you that Dumbledore dies, page 586.
Yeah.
Yeah, who would do that? So let me ask you a quick structural question. So, when does the ending start? Like, because earlier you talked about if something doesn't happen by 25%, at what point in the book do you have to put the pieces in place to make it not feel like a Deus Ex Machina? Or is there a point?
Well, I don't, and I think you agree with it. I don't believe in Deus Ex Machina. Like, there's no eagles in my books. If they're like, I can't stand when magic saves the day if it hasn't actually been an established possibility in the first place. I refuse to allow a spell that somebody could have used at the beginning of a fight to finish the fight. One of the reasons for that, like if you watch Pacific Rim, might be the worst movie ever because he whips out this giant chain sword that slices the monster in half after. It was like his last option was to pull out. He unloaded bazookas and rockets and all this crap, and it did nothing. And then he's like, I have one more thing up my sleeve. And he just pushes this simple button, and this giant chain sword comes out, and he cleaves the thing in half. And I'm sitting there going, that was easier than shooting bullets. Why didn't you do that in the first place?
Is that the first one or the second one?
First one. So,
yeah.
All of those things, like for me, again, I know where it's going to end. I don't always know how it's going to end, but hopefully you've got an idea of what all your characters are capable of doing. But I know book one, we got to the end of that book and something happened for us that we went, oh, holy crap, how did we miss that this is a possibility? And that's how we ended up ending the book. And Rhett did something at the beginning of book two that I didn't know was going to happen. And it was awesome. Like I thought, I can't spoil anything.
So to keep you from spoiling.
Yeah, go for it.
Hopefully I can phrase this correctly. So you're definitely a character driven plot. But you do know at least where the book is going to end. Now, is that more of the plot arc ending, or is that more in this is generally where the characters need to end up, e.g., like the bad guy is going to die? But
for us, the story is character. There's this overarching plot that takes place, and this massive, epic world that lives and breathes around them. But what we're doing is we're telling the story from the limited perspective of the characters involved. And so it's always going to come back to their specific role in the world that they're in. So at the end of the books, we know where our characters have to end up. And that might mean physically, that might mean emotionally. But that for us, it's where does Torsten wind up? Where does Whitney wind up? And the question we ask ourselves before writing any book is how do we dismantle our characters to the furthest degree without destroying them completely, because we believe very strongly in taking people down. I mean, and life drags us to the bottommost points before we get pulled back up again. And so there's no Mary Sue's. I don't think that I think that died with Conan the Barbarian. And so like our characters get pulled through the ringer, man. But there's always redemption unless of course I roll a D20.
Not gonna lie, I just had a brain blast on one of my characters. Excuse me. Someone asked a question.
Yeah. So after 500,000 words of pantsing, you just kind of pants your way through all these books, and after all the editing that you've done, working on other people's manuscript, if you could get into a time machine and go back and talk to your former self, your former just starting out pantsing self, what advice would you give a new author who knows they're going to pants their way to success?
He'd probably say to start growing his beard earlier. That's my first guess.
Yeah, don't shave it as often as I used to.
No.
Yeah.
Seriously.
What were you going to say, Ellen?
I said, or hers.
Or hers.
Look at Kayleen. I'm so happy for you.
Sorry, I just had to write that down.
Sorry, I'm trying to figure out how to word this because there's a Bible verse that basically says, look forward, don't look back. And I live by that 100%. I don't live in the past. I've got stuff that I just have to let go, and I just go, that was back then, and now what's going forward. And so it's really hard for me to think back at what I would change or what I would tell myself to change. I do believe that everything that we've done in life brings us to the place that we're in right now, and I'm in a good place. If I were in a bad place, I feel like I'd have some things to tell Steve Beaulieu. But if I were to give myself advice, I would say maybe finish some of those books you started, because a pantser's worst nightmare is probably, I think Scott knows this, you start every single idea you ever have, and after 20,000 words, you move on to the next one, or 50,000 words or whatever it is. I literally have books that are 80,000 words in, and I just went, and went on. And I don't even know where those books are anymore. So they're on hard drives somewhere. So I probably would say like finish some of those books, because it's crazy to have. I don't even need to release them. Probably I wouldn't want to release them, but like finish them.
You got to learn to finish.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, well,
That's advice.
that's content that you can potentially use later. You know, the scene might work somewhere else. And definitely you're using it because it made you a better writer now where you're at.
Just the discipline of having to finish, having to come to a conclusion that makes sense, that works, that ends the story where the story deserves to end. I mean, that's a worthy goal just by itself.
Yeah, I agree.
And starting again with everything you've learned.
We should finish this episode so I can get up.
No, there's just, anyway. So thank you so much for coming on the show, Steve.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Could you let our viewers and listeners know where they can find you and your work?
JamieCastle.com. I know my name is Steve Beaulieu, but Jamie Castle wrote half the Buried Goddess Saga. So JamieCastle.com. That's Jamie like Jamie Lannister, Jaime, Castle.com. We actually just started up a new Facebook group called the King's Shield. And so if you search for the King's Shield, you should be able to find it. It's kind of the fan club for the Buried Goddess Saga. And that's where we're going to do a lot of our giveaways. And I'm hoping to plan some real life scavenger hunt / D&D type events in there. And so if you just want to have fun and hang out there. And then, of course, Amazon, search Jamie Castle, search Rhett C. Bruno. He's my co-author. I would love to just give you the books for free, because I am more proud of this than anything I've ever read or written. I mean, written or produced in my life. And so I would love for you to read it and give me your thoughts, honest thoughts. It's an exciting series, and I'm excited about it.
Well, it sounds like super, super much fun, honestly. And thank you to everyone for hanging out with us.
Hey, before you draw a line through this episode, I actually only showed up here. Didn't have anything to do with getting my feet wet or being nervous about my show next week, you guys. I'm next week, and I'm going to kill your words.
Yes.
I came to say happy birthday to Kayleen.
Happy birthday!
Happy birthday!
Aw.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. It's like a row. Happy birthday, dear Kayleen. Happy birthday to you. And many more.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Aw, well, thank you. Now I'm all flabbergasted. So, audience, live viewers, thank you for coming, hanging out with us. As always, we'd love to know what you think about the show. Talk to us in the comments, hit the like button, subscribe. And for Scott Moon, Lauren Moore, Ellen Campbell, I am Kayleen Williams. It has been a wonderful time hanging out with you on your writer's journey. Be sure to come back next week when we're going to talk about some reading. We're going to talk about some writing, and of course, everything in between right here on Keystroke Medium. Good night, you guys.